Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to welcome you to the Paramita of Generosity. This is the second event of our series that coincides with our community fundraising drive. But before we go any further, I just want to state if there is anyone with any access needs, please let us know in the chat below, and we will do everything we can to help accommodate those. A little bit of an introduction. My name is Andrew Outlaw. I'm a member of Bhumi Sparsha's fundraising circle. And tonight I'm here to do what outlaws do best, which is to take your money, or at least to try. But before I do that, I want to monologue a little bit and give a little bit of background. If this is your first time hearing about what the community fundraising drive is about, what these events are about, I want to rewind the clock back to spring. Bhumi Sparsha put out an ask for volunteers to join a fundraising circle. And a couple of us came together, and we all had a diverse background of experience and knowledge, but we all had one aspiration, which was to make Bhumi Sparsha financially sustainable. And to do that, we generated a couple of ideas, but the first one we decided to act on was a community fundraising drive, to come to the community itself and ask for support. So to do that, the entire month of September, we are seeking to raise the funds needed to make Bhumi Sparsha a sustainable organization. And we're doing that and helping fulfill that through a number of events this entire month. Last week, we heard from Lama about the light and shadows of fundraising. And if you'd like to view that recording, you can right here on Crowdcast. And tonight, we'll be hearing from Lama about the Paramita of Generosity. And this weekend, we'll also have a community conversation to talk more about the topics of money, fundraising, and generosity. So if you can join us then, we would greatly appreciate it. This will all culminate in a final event on October 2nd, where we are still actually seeking the input of the whole Bhumi Sparsha community about what event format this should take, what the theme should be, and what will be most supportive for the community. So if you have any ideas, if you'd like to let us know, please feel free to fill out a survey, which we are going to put into the comment section. We'd love to hear from as many people as possible. I'd also like to draw your attention to the question button at the bottom of your window. You can click on that to submit questions as they arise throughout the talk, and we will do our best to answer those questions towards the end of the talk. We also want to encourage you to use the chat. Just a reminder that this event is recorded and available to the public. So if you would love to watch it again at some point, and maybe even give some money at that point, please do. But it is also a good reminder that this is not a confidential space. So as you participate, please do keep in mind the spirit of Bhumi Sparsha's community agreements, particularly self-focus, using I statements and speaking for yourself rather than on behalf of a group or about the experience of others. And finally, I would like to address that donate button right below me. If you click on that, it will take you directly to the Open Collective page where you can see the progress we are making towards our goal, and you can make a donation that feels right for you. This is my favorite part to talk about. There are two ways to donate. The first and best way would be through a sustaining gift, and that is a monthly donation that reoccurs. And it gives Bhumi Sparsha the ability to forecast where we're going to be financially year in and year out. And so if you are able to make a donation that is a sustaining gift at $10 a month, $15 a month, if that's possible, that is phenomenal. If you can bump that up even higher to $50, $100 a month, if that's within your range, that helps Bhumi Sparsha immensely. But the second best way to give, but equally as important, is a one-time gift as well. So right next to it, there is a one-time gift button. If you don't feel you're in the position to make a sustaining gift, or if you've already made a sustaining gift and you would like to leave a little bit more of an extra donation today, please click that button and hit the donate. Any amount will work. And even if it might not seem like it's doing much, considering the large goal, you can see the breakdown of our budget there. I would like to reassure everyone that when we come together as a community, your small donation stacks up with everyone to make it possible and help sustain Bhumi Sparsha. And now that I've talked your ear off, I would like to remind you that I will be back to ask people for donations at the end, and I would love to do a dance for everyone, but only if we get those donations. Just one. If we get one donation, I'll be happy and I'll do a dance. but I've talked your ear off way too much. Without further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome Lama Justin.
Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank everybody on the fundraising circle and in the community who have come together to be able to make this fundraising project happen. And it's a pleasure to be here to talk with you tonight. And I think, so actually, when I was kind of first contacted about speaking, I was asked to come up with an idea for what I would talk about, and my topic is showing up for the interdependence of Sangha, especially how it relates to the Paramita generosity. And this is an important topic for a lot of reasons. I think one of them is because of how hard money is as a topic in our culture. But I'm going to kind of go back in time a little bit. And I'm going to go back in time to the life of Marpa, the translator, who was one of the early Kagyu forefounders, who had been the child of farmers in Tibet. He was irascible. He had a terrible temper. His parents actually thought that he wouldn't actually amount to much because of what a short fuse he had, and he did all sorts of crazy stuff. He was real pain in everybody's butt. And interestingly enough, he ended up meeting a great translator named Drokmi Lotsawa, who had gone from Tibet down to India to bring back a number of different Tantric Buddhist teachings, and kind of set up shop in Western Tibet, and was teaching, giving empowerments, and spreading the Dharma. Marpa, this kind of young, very angry young man, discovered that he had a love of Sanskrit and started studying with Drokmi, and eventually kind of realized that Drokmi was charging a tremendous amount of money for Dharma instruction. And being kind of the angry, short-tempered person he was, he just said, forget this. I'm going to go to India and bring Dharma back myself. I don't need to pay this guy, all this money for Dharma instruction. And that's what he did. He went to India a number of times, which was very difficult for somebody from Tibet, given, and we're talking, roughly 1000 AD. So, there was disease, there were insects, there were floods, there was the much more extreme weather in India that you find in Tibet, the humidity. And of course, there was all the cultural differences as well. And he set up shop in Nepal for a while to acclimatize, to brush up more on Indic languages, and then to receive some teachings, and then heard about this person named Naropa, who became his teacher, with whom he eventually studied, and later brought Dharma back up to Tibet and propagated that Dharma. And a lot of that Dharma is the same Dharma that Rod and I both have had the opportunity to connect with, both in Asia and here in the US. And I think it's interesting, Marpa's kind of initial relationship to Drokmi Lotsawa's kind of, high, steep prices. And I get it, things here in particular cost a lot of money. My relationship to Dharma as a Dharma student, even to this day, primarily focuses on relationships I have in India, and things are a little bit different in India. There isn't the same monetized relationship to Dharma that we find here. However, taking time off from work and buying a plane ticket and flying to India costs just about as much as a lot of retreats here cost. And so this raises this question about, why is money even part of this, right? Why is the use of resources needed for access to Dharma? And the conversation actually becomes quite interesting when we begin to look at capitalism and the impact of capitalism and our relationship to capitalism. And at the same time, we also need to begin to consider what it is to hold and sustain community for one another. Marpa, in his kind of relatively short-sightedness, thought, I'm just going to go down to India and save a whole bunch of money, and get access to Dharma and bring it back up. And what he ended up doing, though, is in the cultivation of close relationship with his teachers, not only Naropa, but also Kukuripa, Sri Satyabhadra, and others, he was struck by a heartfelt generosity in making offerings to his teachers for the experience that they manifested through their practice via their teaching. And so what we have in the tradition at this point is an emphasis and an importance placed on generosity. And this can be a little hard to understand when we're coming to all of this in the beginning. And what it's all rooted in is a basic deep appreciation for the time and effort and work that various teachers have put into the practice of Dharma, the study of Dharma, the collection of Dharma, all of which takes time. In modern Tantric Buddhism, I wrote a bit on this idea that it's important to me, is this idea of slow Dharma. And so this, I think we could call slow Dharma practice, but within the context of Bhumisparsha, also slow Dharma community, and then slow Dharma growth. And the emphasis on slowness isn't about the fact that everything is slow and takes a long time, but it's about intention. And it's about the cultivation of pure intention, in this particular case, creating community, sustaining community, and deepening community. And of course, since we're not running a monastery, or an anigompa, a nunnery, or any kind of monastic community, we don't have to worry about that. But because we are an emergent Sangha, we have to worry about a lot of things. We have to worry about how it is that we sustain and cultivate a relationship to Dharma. And then we also have to begin to be concerned about what it means to sustain not only the community that we've already begun to grow, but also to continue to nurture the community as it develops. Since we've really kind of taken off during 2020 in particular, we've been incredibly ambitious in the programs we've created, the practices we've developed and put into implementation, and also our community standards, the way that we relate to one another, the way that we are committed to one another, the way that we're committed to diversity, the way that we're committed to creating a safe place for people to be able to practice Dharma. And all of this, I've noticed, in a lot of other Dharma circles, is being not only watched, but admired from afar. And I had the opportunity to meet with the Mission Circle recently and kind of, shared with everybody some of the things that I've heard from the directors of other Sanghas who really admiringly look at not necessarily just the work that we've all put in as a community, but what we're manifesting in terms of being able to co-create a space for the development of emergent awakening together in a way that is dynamic, in a way that is extremely creative, and in a way that to some extent and in some ways really challenges the tradition while being rooted in the tradition at the same time. And so the question is, how do we sustain this? There's a lot that we've done already, and it's really been incredible and inspiring and a tremendous joy to be part of that. And there's so much work for us to do. And the first part of this talk, in terms of the title at the very least, in terms of especially my intention around this, is this exploration around what interdependence within Sangha means within cultivating this Paramita, this perfection of wisdom around generosity. As everybody knows, there are three jewels, right? The Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And the Buddha, whether it's the historical Buddha or this kind of spirit of Buddha nature, the way that awakening arises for all of us, no matter where we are, is the central aspect of what it is that we refer to when we bring up the idea of the Buddha. Is clearly a core tenet to the Buddhist tradition and a core value and an aspect of what it means for us to be an emergent Buddhist community. Then there's the Dharma, which is the precious teachings, and on one level that's the traditional precious teachings, but on another level it's the kind of way that we're putting Dharma practice into action, and what it means to be there for one another, what it means to work through community conflict, what it means to go deep into reinvestigating and interrogating some aspects of the kind of formal Buddhist canon that might need a little bit of refreshing or some subsequent re-examination, because like all faith traditions, the Buddhist tradition has expressed itself through the lens of human beings, and human beings are subject to biases and limitations in terms of the way they conceive of one another or conceive of other people, and all sorts of, I guess you could say, impediments to the flow of natural arising awakening. So part of our Dharma in Bhumisparsha is a reinvestigation and in some places perhaps even a reinterpretation of aspects of the traditional Dharma. So we're kind of holding two worlds at one time, which is one thing that has made Bhumisparsha very noticeable to a lot of people, all around the country, but then even to some extent the world. And this is something that I celebrate and take a tremendous amount of pride in because it's so rare. And of course, then there's this piece around Sangha, right? And so what does it mean to support Sangha? And that is, in my view, a very diverse group, a very intellectually diverse and curious group of practitioners, very inspired group of practitioners, devoted group of practitioners, focused group of practitioners, questioning group of practitioners, honest group of practitioners. And while it's one thing to create a forum and a structure for people to be able to come together to practice, the next big several series of steps ahead of us is creating more training, is a way of enriching Sangha, and really enriching our relationship to Buddha, our relationship to Dharma, our relationship to Sangha. And so closely related to what it means to cultivate generosity is this idea of settling into an exploration of what we might call the four karmas, or the four actions, or four different karma yogas. And we find this a little bit more in the tantric tradition, right? And so Bhumisparsha also is an emergent tantric Buddhist community. And so we pull from both the sutra tradition, what we find not only in the Theravadan tradition, but then also in the Mahayana tradition. But really, some of our most potent and powerful practices come out of the Tantric Buddhist tradition. And so some of this is, the wonderful work that Lama has been doing with Medicine Buddha, with ancestor practice, the work we've been doing with Mahamudra, the work that Chunlei has been doing on Cha, the work that we've been doing with the protectors, you name it. The Mahakumbh Mela we did in the spring of 2020 for anybody who is still here, who was part of that, and hopefully many more practices. But the 4 karmas are basically the practice of pacifying. And so this is around developing these qualities of settling, softening, and supporting. So the question is, how can we continue to pacify this community? And not in some kind of childish way where we're giving somebody a pacifier, but more, how can we continue to settle and soften and support us as we keep going? The next of the 4 karmas is enriching. And so this surrounds this idea of feeling deeply into the richness of our Sangha, feeling deeply into the richness of what still lays ahead of us, right? Adding energy and beneficial qualities to all of the work that we do. Right? So enriching is, how do we enrich the way that we support and train facilitators? How do we enrich Dharma practitioners to be able to take these practices and breathe their own life into them so that all of us can arrive at this experience of awakening in our own form, in our own voice, in our own cultural location, in our own, every location that we inhabit. This is not easy. This is actually exceptionally rare when we look especially at Vajrayana communities, not only in the United States, but globally. But the third of these 4 karmas is the karma of magnetizing. Right? And so this is what we find definitely, actually we find all of these in Dharma protector practice, but this practice of magnetizing surrounds this idea of relating to the energy and energetic nature of the environment around us, right? And creating the causes and conditions to not only find wisdom, but to cultivate and to support and to nurture and to grow, right? Through the investiture of energy into, in this particular case, community, Dharma practice, and then again, both group and personal relationship to, the idea of Buddha or Buddhahood or Buddha nature, right? Or fundamental wakefulness, or Dharmakaya, or Adi Buddha, the kind of nature of Dzogchen, Kuntuzangpo. And so, how do we do this? How do we add energy? How do we cultivate energy? How do we feel into what it is that this community needs? And obviously, this is not a top-down kind of, Vajrayana community either, right? This is a collective emergent community. And so the question then becomes, for the community itself, what are the causes and conditions that need to come together for all of us to be able to feel supported and then also apply the necessary support, both energetic support, but then also this work of tilling the soil, so to speak, this work of planting seeds, this work of taking the long view, so to speak, and then of course, then the 4th karma is destroying and subjugating, which translates into breaking or destroying frivolousness, cutting through and eliminating things that don't work. Right? So in one particular way, this kind of idea of destroying and subjugating has much more to do with creating systemic change that creates further growth. Right? How is it that we can, sometimes we need to raise the ground in order to create increased fertility so that then more things can grow. And so as for us as Sangha, what does it mean to cultivate this paramita of generosity, which is really a commitment to being able to give? And why do we give? We don't give because we're feeling guilty, like that's not what we want to do. We don't give because that's what it says in a book, right? Like in the text. We don't do it because of that. We don't do it because Milarepa says, like, you should give. We don't, we are by our very nature a very thoughtful community. So why do we give? Generosity is also, at times a loaded term when we don't necessarily know where monies are going to. And as we've seen, from the introduction for tonight's talk, there is a lot of work that's being put forward to demonstrate transparency, right? Which is another way of giving to the community, to demonstrate clarity with respect to what's needed. It takes time and it takes energy to grow community. And I have a tremendous amount of faith in this community to be able to rise up and support everybody here, from the teachers to people who are fulfilling administrative roles, to people who are emerging teachers, to people who are engaged in fundraising, to developing a website, all of the various projects, the community ethics project. There's really a tremendous amount, and there's stuff that hasn't even necessarily been envisioned that we are committed to doing too, because we are an emerging community. And what being an emerging community means is creating a commitment to be able to till the field so that things can grow. Right? So there's, I don't know how much I wondered or thought or envisioned where Bhumi Sparsha would be a year from now, a year ago, or 18 months from now. 18 months from now, there was the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Bhumi Sparsha. There was a lot going on just in the world. There's a lot going on in all of our lives. And the one thing in looking back at all of this that I see and love and celebrate is the way that we all seem to have hit upon something exceptionally vital, exceptionally powerful, exceptionally moving. And we moved incredibly quickly to be able to create this. And this is something that I think is in and of itself an expression of a kind of generosity, this commitment to work with one another, this commitment to support one another through difficulty. I can think back to a number of really difficult experiences that people were going through, not necessarily within the context of any kind of interpersonal relationships in the Sangha, but just what we've all been struggling through over the past 18 months or 2 years. Everything from trying to make sense of the insanity of the Trump administration and just what was going on politically in the country, to the COVID crisis, to personal health issues, to personal experiences of insight, to loss, so much, and the question becomes how to keep this going, and so this interdependence aspect of this talk is really about kind of holding up this image of what it means for all of us to be interrelated in a way that allows us to support this whole experiment. And yes, we're an experimental community. I think sometimes it's easy to write experiments off because they are experimental, right? And something that's experimental can have an incredibly high, fast rate of development, and then peak, and then pass away somewhat quickly. But there are plenty of experiments that have shut up and plateaued and grown even more. And I guess my question for the community is, can we do that? Can we, in an interdependent way, in a way where we appreciate every single circle that helps to keep this community together, every single voice, every single presence, every single doubt, every single question, every single resolution, every single mantra, every single expression of the experience of insight or awareness, every single supplication, every single dedication of merit. How can we bring all of this together in this way that causes us to not only see the joy, see the unique nature of this community, but then also to allow ourselves to kind of open our heart chakra, so to speak, so that we can feel love for this, so we can feel gratitude. The perfection of generosity isn't this practice of, necessarily just like, giving somebody your bank account and just saying, here, take all of it. I need to be generous because everyone's telling me to do that, right? Closely connected to the authentic arisal of generosity is opening our heart up to gratitude. And this is the gratitude to the amazing flowering of Dharma that has arisen in this community, but then also the amazing flowering of commitment to one another, right? The amazing flowering of commitment to practice. And I guess I have to ask, if there has been a deepening in practice and a deepening in relationship and a deepening in personal identification with Dharma in general, even in these ways that we're kind of re-examining, recreating, breathing fresh life into a tradition that had been primarily monastic, into this much more new, dynamic, and iterative form. And is that something for which we can experience deep gratitude? Even messiness. I'm sure a lot of you know, my day job right now is, working as a chaplain for New York City Department of Correction, and I'm constantly inundated with messiness, the messiness of a schedule that constantly changes, the messiness of people constantly suffering, the messiness of people having, very strong reactions to things. And there is benefit in messiness. There is joy in messiness. There is wisdom in messiness. And while I would never wish upon this community that kind of messiness, my question is can we even find the gratitude for the messiness, for that deep kind of fecundity that arises from the shit, the stuff that's hard, stuff that sometimes maybe in the moment we don't even necessarily know or have the mechanism to lovingly address, but we have the commitment to address it. I think that's an important piece of this, is gratitude for our rough edges, gratitude for the places we need to grow. So when we kind of look back at Marpa, we find this kind of renegade, angry young man who's like, man, screw all this money stuff. I'm going to go to India and I'm going to get this all on my own. But then we cut to this person whose practice deepens and they experience great devotion and love and gratitude for what his teachers have given him. That when you read his biography, it seems like every other page he's offering these piles of gold dust. That was kind of like the commodity. They fill up these bags of kind of gold dust. And while perhaps, maybe it makes sense to mail your gold dust to Alex for deposit, you could do that. But really, like, the question is like, can we open ourselves up to love and gratitude and joy and a knowledge that, yes, this is a work in progress. It's not perfect. There's a lot of work to do, and that's okay. There's a lot of beautiful challenges ahead of us. What does it mean for Bhumi Sparsha to have a teacher training program? What does it mean for Bhumi Sparsha to be able to develop community chaplains? What does it mean for Bhumi Sparsha to grow what we can offer, not just the community, but can Bhumi Sparsha become then a springboard for future Vajrayana teachers? So there was this time, Rod and I would have these kind of, this is way before Bhumi Sparsha was even, a twinkle in anybody's eye. Rod and I would get together whenever he was passing through New York, or we were at, some kind of conference together, and stay up and eat Chinese food and drink wine and talk about what's missing, what needs to happen. What needs to happen in America? It's clear that nobody else is going to do this, right? At some point, we were even invited to, try and connect with the Karmapa to see, what can we do to really kind of advance, Tantric Kagyu Dharma in the West. And it became clear that a lot of people were just not interested in committing to, this kind of change. And yet that never stopped us from dreaming and thinking and texting and emailing and getting on Zoom and making videos together and just not holding back. And that's part of our ethos, is not holding back. And while it's obviously true, I can't speak for Rod, and I'm not interested in doing that, I could speak for myself and say that I'm in this for the long haul. Yeah, I'm in this not because it needs to last for a long time. I'm in this because I'm committed to seeding change within the way that Tantric Buddhism arises in the West, looks in the West, presents in the West, is possible in the West. And we've only scratched the surface. And in order to do this, we need to look at how we can cultivate the field, how we can engage in these four karmas, how we can look at pacifying circumstances to be able to institute the growth that's needed, how we can enrich the ground. Right? So the creation of this fundraising circle is a really good example of the beginning of just enriching this. And before the fundraising circle came together, some of the kind of initial conversations around fundraising were very kind of maybe a little funky and like innocently naive, and that's great. There's a lot of energy in that too, throwing out ideas, daydreaming, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. Right? And now we're at the stage of organizing our enriching activities, and especially organizing our magnetizing activities. About what it means to be able to kind of change the circumstances so that we're able to actually become increasingly self-sufficient, right? So that we're able to foster more growth, so that we're able to go deeper. And then destroying obstacles. What are some of these obstacles? Some of these obstacles are the way we get in our own way around feeling gratitude, the way we get in our own way with generosity. I've heard so many people, and I identify with this, and it's a really hard conversation when people say, Dharma should just be free. It should be, And before Bhumi Sparsha existed, I ran a Dharma center for Gyaltsen Rinpoche in Brooklyn. And there was one really lovely, very generous donor whose primary commitment to the Dharma Center was, I'm going to give you a chunk of money every year so that you don't have to charge a lot of money for things. And it was incredible. We were able to have teachers come from around the world. Some of the greatest Vajrayana teachers, contemporary Vajrayana teachers, came to give them Dharma and some instruction and stuff. And, that's actually, those are the circumstances around how I met Rod through the Dharma Center. Saw him on social media, and I was like, man, this guy looks cool, and let's invite him to the Dharma Center so we can hang out and have lunch. And it worked until, this great generous benefactor was like, I've been giving for a while, I've been giving a lot of money, and I need to slow it down. And there wasn't the ability, there wasn't the community, there wasn't this kind of understanding in that moment around what it means to come together, to support and nurture, to magnetize, to express a certain kind of investment in co-creating a Dharma space. And so the place, kind of dissolved, and that was okay. And perhaps that will happen here. And if that happens, that's okay too. But I think it's worth us looking at what it means to come together, what it looks like for us to explore in our heart how gratitude manifests. I'm very grateful for Rod in kind of introducing this conversation around the exploration around the shadow side of this, and the complexity of money, complexity of, maybe I think you could say probably a lot of collective scarring in relationship to capitalism. Right? And yet, coming back to the very kind of nature of this talk is, how can we show up in this interdependent way for one another, for Sangha, to continue to support, this experiment? It could very well be that Bhumisparsha, never produces future Vajrayana teachers. It could very well be the case that, this is a short-lived, beautiful flower. And if that's what happens, that's what happens. And yet, there's something about enduring challenge and working together around that I think is so moving. And again, when we look at Marpa, Marpa had this initial kind of very grueling, long, as far as we know, it was a long, time spent in India. He depleted all of his funds, and then he was like, man, I got to go back to Tibet. And he sold the property that he inherited, went back to India, spent all that money, came back to Tibet again, primarily for money, gathered his resources, went back down to India for a third time, and kind of quote unquote re-upped with everybody. But not out of this kind of like, ignorant, just, well, this is just what I do, right? He was like, I got to bring this shit back. I got to change people's minds because my mind has been changed. I've got to help people with their suffering. I've got to continue to be able to heal not only myself, but others. I need to propagate this. I need to enrich this. I need to pacify all of the obstacles to Dharma taking root. Because even back then in Tibet, there was Dharma, but Dharma had gone through this kind of like dark period. And Marpa was really one of the key people to help revitalize. And if it wasn't for Marpa, there would be, we would have lost a lot of inspiration and even actual lineal practices that ended up in other traditions, like in the Sakya tradition and the Gaelic tradition. In fact, a considerable amount of Hevajra practice. I mean, for the Dharma nerds, I guess, wouldn't exist. Kriya Samaya practice wouldn't exist in Tibet. Marpa was the linchpin for so much Dharma in Tibet. And part of it was this kind of constant expression of gratitude and hard work. Hard work. And from what I've seen with everybody who's involved in trying to move the needle in Bhumi Sparsha from kind of, just the new participant, I'm just showing up for the first time level, to people who are volunteering a tremendous amount of time and effort and energy into the various circles, to, Rod and I, we're doing hard work. We're doing it, not because it's like not a resume builder, it's not anything, right? We're doing it for the love of the thing. We're doing it for the love of Sangha. We're doing it for the love of Dharma. We're doing it for the love of Buddha nature. Our fundamental awakening. We're doing it because of our potential. We're doing it because we see this potential in one another. And so this is this piece of like coming together and really kind of calling out in a supportive way how to celebrate and enrich this interdependence with one another. I was actually thinking this morning, like super early, I've been up since 3. So this is like 3 a.m. I was like, oh yeah, I've got to talk tonight. And I was like, I wonder how much money I've spent in Dharma, like just over the years. I've been to India over 15 times. So that's easily over $15,000, easily. Some of these trips have been over about a year. Longest ones were about a year at a time. There's a disruption of any kind of income earning. And there was, making offerings to teachers. And I'm not saying this because everybody else needs to do this. I don't have any regret, I don't have any regret. I think the thing for me is Dharma has changed me. It has allowed me access to a type of wisdom that before practicing I would read about, and I would love to read about because it was just so amazing, But then to be able to begin to taste it, and then that deepens from tasting into learning how to cup your hands together and hold it. And that leads to being able to have direct relationship, to be able to help the flow of it. And then to allow it to become something that is more permanent in one's kind of stream of consciousness, one's kind of, the way we relate to the world. This is something that I hope for everybody who, even shows up to Bhumi Sparsha once. May you have an enduring relationship to Dharma. May we all have an enduring relationship to Dharma. It takes work. It's not easy. There was a time after my root teacher, Anizamo, died, her family got together and they said, let's start a nunnery, or an anigompa, place for nuns to live together in community in her name. And I was out in Sikkim at the time, and I was like, man, this is such a cool idea, And then they were like, okay, now we gotta start putting the money together, And I was like, oh shoot, man, like, not only do I not have much money, like, I don't know how I feel about this, and then that felt felt like, from the heart, right? But then it also felt like, man, like, what's up with me? Like, why am I being so limited in my thinking right now? like, yes, these feelings are authentic, but let me look at this, right? And so I spent time kind of walking around Gangtok, the capital, Sikkim. Spent time talking with Anizong's daughter, a very close Dharma sister, searching my soul, so to speak. And, I turned around, and her daughter and I both kind of went in on sponsoring the creation of a life-size statue of Vajrayogini. That still, this Ani Gompa is still there, obviously. I don't know how many nuns are there in retreat and in constant community, but I was able to be part of that community. And I was able to help pay for the artwork. I was able to help pay for their sustenance, right? And so we take the hardship that a lot of Himalayan women have in accessing Dharma. It fills me with gratitude that I was able in that moment to be able to help, to help counter some of these forces that made it very difficult for my root teacher, who was also female, to be able to connect to Dharma and to be taken seriously, as a nun. Very early on, and I'm a little freakish, but when I was in high school, I ended up raising several $1,000s just from small donations. I was kind of trolling Lower Manhattan for donations for a monastery associated with this tulku, Lelung Rinpoche. Who's actually this Gelug tulku. He's like a couple of years older than me. So he was young. He was like high school age at the time. We'd become pen pals. And lo and behold, I raised this money just because I was interested in Buddhism and Tibet. And then years later, the first time I went to India, I wrote to him, and he was like, "Oh, you should come to where I stay in South India," and I did, and I met all of the young monks. They were older now, of course, who I helped raise money for, and I still have these little black and white pictures of them. They're 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, and how I was meeting them as teenagers, and it was just this feeling of here is a Dharma sibling I'm helping to support. I've helped to support. Maybe I'll never see them again in my life. And yet I was able to help them with their ability to connect with Dharma, their ability to develop relationship to teachings and practices that liberate the mind. There's this young tulku also in Sikkim that I was a sponsor for several years, offering money to help pay for his education, food for his family. Kind of very remarkable young tulku, reincarnate teacher. I was really into Power Rangers. And so, all of these things, it's easy these days to kind of, you don't need to look very far for these sanghas that have, demonstrated some of the worst kind of activities in terms of financial abuse and things like that, right? But what this is all about is creating the causes and conditions for more love, creating the causes and conditions for shared relationship, to a commitment to being better. Right? When we consider, something as relatively basic as the Bodhisattva vow, how incredible is it to be able to create the causes and conditions, to be able to support others, to make the aspiration, to dedicate themselves to the alleviation of the suffering of other beings. When we, find ourselves in this world where people are the kind of maybe one unifying factor behind a lot of people, it seems to me, in the United States is, I'm just looking out for me and mine. How amazing is it for us to be able to gather around one another to kind of create this Dharma citadel, so to speak, if we're going to use kind of flowery classical Tibetan kind of concepts. This this mandala, this place of deep power for us to come into relationship together, to practice together, to hold each other accountable together, to support one another, to go deep together and soften some of our rough edges, to soften some of our places of ignorance, to come into direct, simple relationship. It's coming back to this idea of what does it mean to even envision Sangha that is lovingly interdependent? And I'm not saying this as a oh, this is what I think. This is more, let's lay back and daydream. Let's sit back and daydream, not in a way that's just about, inventing things that don't exist, right? But about acting on our ideals and trying to cultivate something that we're trying to give a sense of power to. That we're actually demonstrating like an audacity in the face of our current culture, an audacity in the face of the way we suffer, an audacity in the face of the way it seems so natural for people to oppress one another, that we're trying to disrupt that. And so what does it mean then for us to be interdependently connected in developing generosity and expressing gratitude? And I get it, like money's not always easy to come by, I grew up in a family with, very little money, family, like kind of immigrant grandparents. My father is an immigrant. His parents were immigrants. Not easy. And I understand that 100%. And sometimes there's nothing more amazing and powerful than what our activity can be when we're inspired. And I'm not saying that has to manifest in the form of, building a printing press in the basement and printing a whole bunch of counterfeit cash. I'm also not saying you need to go out and sell candy on the subway or empty out your life savings at the expense of yourself, your family, your circle of support, everybody who depends on you. That's not what it's about, and that's not what we're asking for, right? But we're asking for the support that's born out of gratitude. Yeah, that's reasonable. Right? When we don't have so much of a cultural connection to resting into gratitude because we're so used to looking out for ourselves or looking out for our circle of support and nobody else, or our community and nobody else, it's a real stretch, and I get that, and I've been there. But when we're able to see the way our relationships develop, the way our practice develops, how much we've changed, both as individuals, also together as a group, that's where the beauty is. That's where this kind of untold joy is, not only just in the practice of generosity, but just in being in relationship, showing up together. So as an interdependent network, then the question becomes, how do you connect to one another as we do this work? How do you express all of this in a way that allows for your voice to be captured, the spirit of your energy to be captured, and other things? So there are a couple questions that I'd like to get to, and actually, for some reason, okay. So yeah, I mean, and so you can ask a question in the question tab or in the chat box. So this first question is from Indrani. Hi, Indrani. Could I speak to how we can work with any gaps between the intention to give and the capacity to give? Yeah, I mean, this is a really kind of personal space, this kind of gap between what we want to do and can do, right? What is coming from our heart and versus, or not even versus, right? But in relationship to what capacity we have. And I mean, I think that the thing is anything, give what you can, if it's anything from $3 to support. And I'm not talking about financial support in this particular case, and constructive support. Add your 2 cents. The 2 cents is more metaphoric 2 cents of your voice. And the thing is like, Bhumi Sparsha is rich because of all of the voices. It's rich because of the presence that everyone brings. Bring your presence, bring yourself, bring your energy. If you have some time, maybe you want to volunteer some time. Bring your healthy critical analysis. All of these things around generosity are not only rooted in money, right, in currency, but they're rooted in showing up for one another. So generosity is not only measured in terms of the depths of one's pocket or the size of one's wallet or purse or bank account or anything, right? Generosity is showing up to be in an open, spacious relationship. It's how we forgive one another. It's how we show up for one another when we're feeling edgy, and can we hold that edginess in a way that's supportive? And I'm kind of going back to this, kind of brief touching on messiness in community. Because I mean, Sangha is not easy. I get that, and this, when we look, from what it looks like in the tradition, it seems like the Buddha was a little bit of a kind of reactive leader, where it wasn't until a problem came up in the Sangha that then they would engage that problem and a new rule or a new way of organizing or a new response would arise, right? There's generosity in that too, in working that way. So I want to be clear, and I really want to thank you, Indrani, for bringing this up. This is not just about cash or credits. This is about showing up, expressing gratitude in that way. And so to feel into what we can give. And again, to be totally honest, the first time my Sikamese adopted family were like, yeah, we're gonna build this Anigompa, and I was like, what? Give money, And it's not because I'm a terrible person. It's just I had very little exposure to giving, right? And this idea of giving, and there's something about the infusion of that energy that somehow, and this is rather mysterious, helps foster and create change, right? It took me a long time to kind of get comfortable with that. And then, of course, by the time I was comfortable with it, I really didn't have a lot of money. I worked kind of this strange work as a contractor, and it was feast to famine. So when it was feast time, there was a lot of money. When there was no work because of the economy, then there was literally no money. And so it was very unstable. So I can identify with kind of this range of comfort / means, and in response to your question, this process of generosity is about offering up what one can offer, including your presence, and because it's an important presence and it's one that I value. I hope that's helpful. And so the next is, what is best for the situation, a monthly donation or a one-time donation? Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, both are important and both sustain us. I'm going to let the empowerment of Andrew take over. I think they can speak a little bit better than I. But again, it's about what doing feels right.
Would you like me to talk about that right now?
Yeah, please.
Sure. Yes. So both are very important. In many ways, a lot of times they can be equitable, where a $120 donation is actually equivalent to a $10 donation. But in a lot of ways, a sustaining gift is a bit more powerful because it allows us to foresee into the future where we will be. So if someone were to say, should I give $70 right now as a one-time gift, or should I give $5 as a monthly gift? That $5 will go a lot further rather than that $70 at one time. That $70 would need to be re-upped every year, but that $5 we know and can sort of count on it and expect it. And in that case, I would make the claim that by making a monthly sustaining gift, you are giving the security that Bhumi Sparsha really needs to acquire from this fundraising drive. But that doesn't undermine what a one-time gift can do as well. If you're diligent, or if you're just in the moment and making a gift, it still carries immense weight. So if you are able to make a one-time gift today, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to just address Annika's question, which also is a good one. Speaking of gaps, how do you want Sangha members to balance monthly dana for teachers and monthly donations to Bhumi Sparsha in cases where capacity is already met with dana? Again, another very good question. So I'm just gonna, and I'm saying this out of full support and respect. This is not about what I want. This is about what feels best. I think for all of us, we just need to make the decision that feels right. I'm not particularly interested in pushing anybody into a place that feels uncomfortable. That's not a value of mine. I'm happy to push people in a place that's uncomfortable within the realm of Dharma teaching, right? And getting uncomfortable in the way we practice. But for this kind of thing, I really want to be able to let everybody know that it's important to trust into what feels right for you. Right? And that I think I also feel the need to say this too, just given kind of a relative kind of power position as one of the teachers in this community, that I am not harboring any particular judgment or feelings about which way people give or not, if they can or not. I mean, it's this really is ultimately very personal. So I would ask, you or anybody else who kind of feels that they're kind of navigating that question, to really kind of, lean into what your heart is telling you and what is possible. I hope that's not too loosey-goosey, but I want to be able to demonstrate and maintain this recognition that while perhaps we should lean into what generosity means for us, we should also do so in a way that demonstrates ease and self-care and self-support. There's something that's kind of counteractive to the practice of generosity when we feel we're being pressured into doing, into being generous, or to being generous in a particular way. So I just want to check the time. It seems like I'm probably at time. Excuse me for adjusting myself into a sitting posture that's a little more comfortable. Before I end, I really want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. But more importantly to me, I want to thank everybody who has shown up more broadly. That includes Andrew and Alex and everybody who has been involved in the fundraising circle and all of the circles. And I especially want to thank everybody who's shown up in your practice. You're an inspiration to me, and thank you. Thank you all very much.
Before we wrap up entirely, first off, I have to do a little bit of a dance because we did get some donations, which is what we were looking for, and we are very grateful for it. So thank you. We just wanted to give a few updates before letting everyone go, particularly about the remaining upcoming events. We have the community discussion, which is going to take place this Sunday, this upcoming Sunday at noon. So if you can join us, we would love to have you there. Also, mark your calendars for October 2nd for the final event of this series. And we will be sending around a link in the chat that will provide a survey, which would be incredibly helpful to anyone who can fill it out and provide us a little bit of direction in how you're feeling about this whole process. And finally, I would just like to make one final ask. Giving is just a very important thing, and it's what will sustain us in the long run. That monthly sustaining gift button will take you just to the sustaining gift, but if you can make a one-time gift, maybe just for tonight, just for this talk, of $5, $3, $1, whatever works for you, that will help propel us a little bit further. And I know a lot of people need a reason to give or a case. And I know in my personal case, Bhumi Sparsha came to me through happenstance earlier this year in February. And I was in a rough spot, and the community really came together and made me feel welcome and gave me a place that's, while I'm not always the most diligent practicer, I can always call it home and I can always come back to it. And for that, Bhumi Sparsha means the world to me. And that's my reason to give. While I consider myself a lay member to the fullest, I want to see it grow and I want to see it sustain itself and be here, not just for myself, but for everyone. And if Bhumi Sparsha touches you in some way, it is important to you in some way, helps you get through that day, I would encourage you to either make that monthly sustaining gift or make a one-time gift just as a show of support. But if you can't, that's okay too. That's what this is all about. Not everyone can make that gift. And as a community, it's our responsibility to step up when we can to make the gift and help those who aren't able to. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. And I will just toss it back to Lama Justin one last time.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yes, I mean, there's a lot Andrew just said that I agree 100% with. And I think this point, if you can give. And if you can't, that's okay. There is... there's a lot of value placed in practicing. And actually, I will say this one thing. My present teacher, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, at one point told me, don't give me anything because you're showing up. You fly to India, you disrupt your life, you risk getting sick, you risk, riding in these jeeps on these crazy Himalayan roads, and you're practicing. Like, that is enough for me to teach you. And I want to be clear. Bhumi Swarsha wants to survive, hopefully will survive. And this is not about surviving or not surviving, I think. But the gift of your practice to the community is a vital gift as well. So if it's possible, this is a way of benefiting everybody in the Sangha, benefiting the mission, benefiting the dream, benefiting how we show up for one another. But if for some reason that, giving isn't possible at this time, that's okay. Give your practice. Give your support, give your love, show up for one another. That too ends up being an incredibly profound gift. And again, above everything else is opening our heart up to gratitude. What does that mean? Opening our heart up to being able to connect with one another in an interdependent way and see that wisdom. That's what this is about. I'm really confident that Bhumi Swarsha will keep going and survive and thrive and all of that. And we're going to show up for one another. I know that. And it's a joy to show up for you and be here with you tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your love and your support of one another. Thank you for your sangship. Thank you. All right. So I think I'm going to go unless somebody tells me otherwise.